Hey everybody, the video you're about to watch is my interview with Tom and Val Harbour. They'll explain what it's all about. They're currently in Montreal. But unfortunately, the internet connection was not very strong. So the video quality is not great, but the audio I think is all there. And I would encourage you just to kind of muscle through because what they have to share is really valuable and really important. And so thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Another one of these multiplication videos, and here I am with Tom and Val Harbour. Tom and Val, I think we met way back in Bible college days. We won't reveal how long ago that was. So we've known each other for a long time, but you guys are in Montreal as we speak. And so tell us what you're doing in La Belle Province.
Okay, do you want to start that?
Sure. So we came to Montreal in September of 2019 with the purpose of learning French. So we attended the University of Quebec at Montreal from September until the end of April, learning French. And so our plan is after that to return back to BC and start a French work of some sort.
Yeah, the way that we ended up being involved like this is that the PAOC has a program through Missions Canada called FRIM, or French Intensive Training for Ministry. We have done the French intensive training. We passed all our courses. Yay. And now we are finishing up practicum here at Église Gospel Vie in Montreal and starting to do our preparation for return to the central Okanagan.
Okay, so I want to talk about that in a minute, but I'd be curious to just know, I think you've spent most of your adult lives in Western Canada, if not your whole lives. So I'd be curious to know, what have you learned about Quebecois culture since you've been living in Montreal?
We've learned that the language is very, very important. Like anybody we've told, any Quebecois person we've talked to who we've told that we're here to learn French, like they're so grateful. And they're just so like, wow, that's awesome that you're here to learn French. Because I guess there's not that many Canadians that come here to learn French.
In fact, we were a little surprised when we started our classes at UQAM. We were in the FLS classes, or the Français Langue Second classes, and we were like the only Canadians in there. There were more people from Russia than there were from Canada. More Arabic people, more Japanese, more Chinese, like I said, more Russian people, and we were it for the Canadians. It was quite something.
How much did your high school French prepare you for for your experience?
Depends how well you did in high school French.
Some of us might not have been as successful as wanted in French 11. So, yeah, there's an irony in being here, definitely. We did do a lot of online stuff before we came, and we had already plugged in with the French Cultural Center in the Central Okanagan and done some classes with them. So that was definitely helpful.
Right. So let me ask you about that. Tell us a little bit about the story. Like, how did you even get engaged with French culture? What was it that drew you in? How has the Spirit sort of called you into serving, Francophone people in Canada?
Okay, well, that story is like 17, now 18 years in the making. We just celebrated our 28th anniversary last weekend. We came here on our 10th anniversary. We came to Montreal, strictly tourist, like did Montreal, drove up to Quebec City, and just fell in love with the place. And it was interesting because even then I remember Val mentioning, it would be great to be in the houses of people. Like, we loved the time, but it would be great to be in the houses. 3 weeks later, we got home to our church, which was and is Emmanuel Church in West Kelowna. And our, at the time, lead pastor, Derek Hamry, announced that we were now in partnership with a church in Quebec. And that was the first West-East partnership, or Quebec and English Canada partnership that happened. And I remember leaning over to Val in church, talking like you're not supposed to, and saying, we're going to go. Yeah.
And then, so from there, we took our kids. Our kids were all in French immersion. So then we took our kids one summer in 2007, and we're with our sister church for the summer. And so then that was another step for us. And when we were done that, it was kind of like, okay, now are we done with this, or
have we scratched the itch, you know?
And looking back, we realized that after that we both went back to university, and so that kind of took up a little bit of time. Yeah,
so we came in 2007 from our summer in Quebec. 2008, I started my master's. Finished her master's in 2015, and then, as if you were there, or if anybody watching was there, Conference 2016 took place in person, and it was here in Montreal. And at that time, that's when I discovered that Fit Frem, which used to be the flight program, had been relaunched. And at that point, it was another pause to consider: is this something, you know, God, are you bringing this back? Because I definitely had the sense once I returned to Montreal that we were not done here yet. And that was never shaken at all. In fact, I would argue that every time we would like tap on a door just to see if maybe this is where God was pushing us next, the door would just blow open, and everything just opened, and here we are.
So I don't know how you're going to answer this, or if you can answer this, but what is it about the French culture, Francophone people, that captures your heart?
Oh, that is a hard question. There's a certain, and if you ever talked again to Derek Hamry, he would talk about the je ne sais quoi, like the I just don't know about the French culture. It is definitely a unique place with a huge religious history that is generally forgotten, but the people themselves are so creative, passionate, and dynamic, and are willing to engage in conversations. A little bit about where we are here is we are at a Francophone church, Église Gospel Vie, but it's also a Black church in the heart of Montreal, and we actually live in the gay village. So like there's just culture all over the place, and the melange of people in our church is just fantastic, and we thrive with that. Like we are certainly minority as being Caucasian people in our church, and only having two languages makes us a bit of a minority as well. So it's just a very different place to be. Yeah.
And even like, and just the need that's in Quebec as well. Like the number of churches that we have here is way less. I don't know the exact numbers or that sort of thing, but there's just Quebec is considered a non-churched.
Yeah, it's a post-Christian unreached people group. There are like we live in West Kelowna, and there are numerous towns of that size here in Quebec that, let alone Pentecostal, but there are no evangelical churches in those towns. And like these are towns of like 40, 50,000 people, and there's no evangelical presence. Conversely, while we've been on quarantine, we started doing a count the cathedral thing as we go for our walks in our neighborhood or in our quartier, and we're into the 20s now of cathedrals, and a number of them are empty and crumbling, but it's too expensive to rip them down.
Wow. So so obviously the need is great, and God's placed this in your hearts in a unique fashion. So let's sort of fast forward a little bit. Last time we talked, you told me you're going to spend some time sort of traveling back from Montreal to West Kelowna. And then in the fall, when you return to BC and when you're back in West Kelowna, what's the plan?
So, before we get back to West Kelowna, we've started a small group here online, because that's what we do now, and we're going to actually, because of the COVID virus, we've realized that this isn't something that we have to stop when we leave here. So we're actually going to continue our small group throughout the summer and when we get back. And our hope is that we will be able to mix people from our group here and from our group in Kelowna as we get to know more Francophones in Kelowna, and just kind of start out that way.
And the other part with that is that for sure we have an evangelical, mandate. We want to, introduce, Christian community. The other part, even as we begin, will be as we get plugged in the cultural center, to do something along the lines of, take classes there or online classes there, and then hope for a group that's like, hey, help Tom and Val with their French kind of group, and then hopefully see those people flow into that group, into our group. So yeah, into the other group.
Yeah, so just developing relationships in West Kelowna, in Kelowna.
Yeah, because again, before this whole COVID thing, we were thinking Kelowna and Montreal, and now we realize it's wherever, because it doesn't matter by location anymore. So, we're excited with the possibility that we could be connecting with people in in Kelowna, and they could in turn know people here in Montreal. And that could feed back to Église Gospel V, which has been our host church here and has been very generous with us and supporting us in what we're doing here as well. And they're excited too, which is really cool. So partnerships that don't just cut off July 1st as we leave, but that we can continue to be working on. So yeah, it's cool.
Right. So if anything good for you guys has come out of this COVID experience, is that it's actually expanded your potential reach and expanded your opportunity for ministry. So
we're actually writing a blog post right now that talks about that. Just the whole, wow, we hadn't thought about this, and yet here we are. So that'll be published in the next couple of days. Yeah. Great.
Well, we'll make sure to, at the end of the interview, give people the information of how they can find that. So what's the end goal? Like in West Kelowna, you've returned to your hometown. What do you foresee the next, 12, 18 months looking like in terms of your activity in West Kelowna?
We are thinking and praying about that a lot right now. We definitely are looking to see some of the bridge thing happening with the online stuff, but we also want to be a face-to-face presence. And out here, we've been doing things like participating in the Alpha course in French, for example, and discovering, as Val intimated earlier, that there's not having people into our homes, sharing life, and having some sort of Christian presence in the French community, whether that means that we're doing meetings in our house or perhaps renting a location or something like that. Again, the online stuff, exploring book studies together, just living life together with a conscious, determined effort to engage the Francophone community.
Right. And so I guess the obvious question that I haven't asked yet is, how many Francophone people live in the Okanagan? Like, is it you and 8 other people, or like how many people are there that would identify as Francophone?
There are actually about 3,000 Francophones in Kelowna and about 6,000 in the Okanagan Valley.
Okay, so it's a decent sized population for sure. And as I understand, now again, I don't know what's happening this year, but I think some of that is a sort of a migratory population as well, or are those just people who have residence in Kelowna, in the Okanagan?
I think the transitory people would be on top of that, is my
definitely 10, 15, 20 years ago, there were a ton of fruit pickers who would come to the Okanagan. A lot of those transitory workers are now Mexican, Latin American.
Okay.
There are still people who come through, but it's not the huge floods that it used to be. So there is enough of a permanent population that both Penticton and Kelowna have permanent Francophone schools, like it's its own provincial school district, and there's enough of a population in both those towns to have a school where at least one parent is Francophone.
Right. Great. Awesome. Well, as a district, I know we're very excited to be partnering with both of you in this endeavor, reaching into the Francophone population in the Okanagan. It's about as sort of a unique and out-of-the-box approach as I'm aware of that we're involved in right now. So it's really fun to be part of that with you guys. So if people are interested in hearing more about your plans, your ministry, with connecting, if they're interested in connecting with you personally, how do they go about doing that?
Well, there are a couple of ways. If they just want to read about what we're doing, we do have a blog set up. It's called Blog Quebecois at .weebly.com. So I'll send it to you later. You can type it out just so people know.
We'll endeavor to put it in the introduction so that people can find the link. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll text you in a minute. So it's blogquebecois.weebly.com. Otherwise, you could email tom@emmanuelchurch.life or val@emmanuelchurch.life and talk to either of us directly that way.
Or probably on the Emmanuel Church website.
Yeah, if you go to emmanuelchurch.life, you can launch that way as well. So there are different ways to get to us.
Great, fantastic. Well, listen, thanks for taking the time to share a little bit about what's on your hearts and the opportunities that God's placing before you. Really great to hear about this. Really looking forward to seeing you back in BC in a few months, and excited to see how things unfold in terms of your ministry to Francophone people.